Your brain will remember images better. It'll also remember stories. We are a storytelling beast. We want narrative. It'll also remember novelty. Anything novel will stick. Anything ordinary won't.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to remember things better, then do we have the Memory Craft show for you. Today I'll be talking with Lynne Kelly, the Queen of Memory, a senior memory champion, science writer, anthropologist, and the author of a brilliant book on the most amazing memory techniques, Memory Craft. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about how to improve your memory with the most powerful methods in history, from medieval bestiaries to Tibetan mandalas. That, plus we'll talk about Mom in the British Museum, beloved spiders, Damien and Stonehenge, Dead Dino Drive, and 30 Dirty Chauvet Pole, the power of Hadrian's Wall, what on earth is a wapscallion, that's wapscallion, the importance of earmuffs, and what in the world Le Petit Professeur and suiting a gorge, please forgive me, has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Lynne. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready to shine. All of that sounds like wonderful fun.
Woohoo! All right, we are going to have some tremendous fun here today. So before we dive right into things, does modern man have the best memory of all time?
Absolutely not, because we've relied on writing and on the computers and things, so we're not using our memories fully. As they were up till only a few hundred years ago, people trained their memories all the time.
So was your memory, if we go back in time in your timeline, how was your memory growing up?
Appallingly bad. I was very good at anything logical. So maths, as we call it here, mathematics was easy. Everything else was hard. Once I got to secondary school, physics, I discovered, great. I could do that, pure logic. But anything that relied on memory, for example, foreign languages, I was really, really bad at. My husband tells me it's not worth taking me on holiday anywhere because a few years later I'll have forgotten all about it and won't be able to remember a thing.
Not the case anymore, is it now? And you won a memory championship from what I understand.
Yes, twice. As senior memory, I'm 60-something now. I can't remember my age, 68 now. My memory is the best it's ever been in my life by a long way. And just to test the theories, because when you're writing books, you need to test everything, I entered the Australian Memory Championships as a senior, over 60, and won it for 2 years, the senior for 2 years in a row, and came in third for the whole country. And that's memorizing things like shuffled decks of cards and strings of numbers and things, totally useless, but good fun.
So you had what we call your definite chief aim or your single-minded purpose. And it sounds like, I can put it no other way, learning about memory and particularly ways that it was done in the past is candy for you.
Absolutely. I'm sort of hyper all the time because it's so much fun and I just want to do this all the time. But I'm applying it to useful things, not just decks of cards and that. Languages and history and all this stuff that I knew nothing about suddenly is available to me because I can remember it.
And I'm 49 now. We've had this show for 4 years. I read on average for the show a book a day, something I could not do when we started this. And I know I haven't taken the time yet. My wife is Chinese, though, so Mandarin is coming up because we're going to have babies coming up. And she's going to be teaching a Mandarin. I'm going to have to learn it. I'm actually excited because I'm convinced if you work your mind, and if we follow some of the tools in your book, it can get stronger. In fact, we had Dr. Michael Merzenich, the father of brain plasticity, on the show, talking about how it can get stronger at any age.
Exactly. And that's such an important message to get out. There is this assumption that our memories will fade and that's natural. We're letting it happen. And I dare say he's told you all of that. And so what I'm about is the methods by which we can keep our memories active.
Let's go way back in time to medieval Europe. And there are two powerful methods that we can learn. In fact, one that we should probably learn, like our ABCs from medieval Europe, that can help us. What's a visual alphabet?
Visual alphabet, you're probably used to a peg system, a thing like 1 sun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, as a way of linking information.
Mm-hmm.
An alphabet can do that too, but by using a visual alphabet, it works much better. So essentially, for each letter, you have an image. Mm-hmm. In my case, I use characters. Arachne for A, a bird for B, a C for cat, D for dragon. And that allows you to link those characters into a story. So if you want to remember something like a speech, you imagine the opening of the speech linking somehow to Arachne, the goddess of spiders. Naturally, that's what I started with, throwing her web over whatever you're starting with. So if it's a 21st birthday party and you want to start with acknowledging that person is an engineer, you imagine her throwing her net over his engineering stuff and messing it all up. And then the bird, in my images, the net is being thrown over the bird who's being attacked by the cat. So you've got a flow. Your brain will see images separate to speech. You can keep them separate and allow you to do the speech without stopping to look at notes. Mm-hmm. And the flow will just happen naturally. So visual alphabet just allows you to hook things in order very quickly. When I'm out birding with my husband, who's a fanatical birder, I remember the bird lists this way. We don't stop and write everything down as we go. He'll call out, for example, our sulphur-crested cockatoo, our big white parrot. I'll imagine the web going over the sulphur-crested cockatoo. And if the next is the black raven, then the bird becomes black. And when I get back to write down the list, I've got all these images in my mind.
Now, this is jumping ahead, and I don't want to go fully to creating a memory palace yet, but I'm convinced that we're a bush people. We evolved moving along the bush, which means we put information into our minds geographically. So as you re-walk or retrace your steps, or you can create it in your neighborhood or in your home, but as you walk forward in your mind and you have placed each of those other items, it makes it easier to then retrieve them.
Absolutely, because your brain will remember images better. It'll also remember stories. We are a storytelling beast. We want narrative. It'll also remember novelty. So the fact that Arachne's throwing her web over the big white bird with the yellow crest, which is sticking through the web, that image is novel, and anything novel will stick. Anything ordinary won't.
So let's say I'm going into the grocery and I've been given a bunch of items to remember. I don't know, I'll throw out artichokes, chestnuts, bananas, avocados. What would be a way that we can use the alphabet and do it in kind of a grotesque or obscene, but not too obscene fashion to remember this?
I wouldn't need particularly obscene or grotesque. Now, your first was artichokes?
Yes.
So Arachne's throwing her web over artichokes. Now, they're getting caught in her web because they all stick up and they're green against the white. Colours and images will work very well. So I've got that image very quickly. Mm-hmm. I don't need any more. That's plenty for something as simple as a shopping list. What was your second one?
Chestnuts.
Chestnuts. So we've now got the bird. Now, my bird's a bird of paradise with long tails, who's very proud of the colour of her tails. Each of these characters will become much more lively and you'll know them better the more you use them. Mm-hmm. But my bird happens to be very proud of her tails, so they are now chestnut colour. So the third one,
bananas.
The cat is attacking the bird. The cat has a banana stuck in its mouth or rear end, wherever you want. That is stopping it. That's what the bird did to stop it attacking. And the fourth one, my dragon.
Avocados for your dragon.
Avocados. The dragon is burning the cat. That's how I get
poor
that
kitty.
Very quick. Yeah, but avocado works well on the burns. Mm-hmm. So the avocado is being used as a to stop the burn.
Very, very right? Good. So, and then let's take this idea and let's say that you're giving a speech or you're simply making a toast at a friend's wedding. How do we use an alphabet to help create a speech if we don't want to have that list in front of us?
exactly the way we just did the shopping list. So your key things, you want to start by mentioning the person's an engineer. Second, you want to acknowledge their parents before you go on to something. So the bird of paradise is with the parents. The beautiful long feathers are wrapped around the present parents in your image. Now we're going to the cat. This person, we're going to tease them because one time they did something stupid, shoplifted from some lollies from a shop when they were a kid. Yeah. So the cat now is all covered in fur with the lollies. So a lolly, candy.
Lollipop, I get it.
Yeah. So in your mind, you've now got this sequence of images, which is just your headings. You don't want it word for word, because then a speech becomes dreadfully repeated and sounds like you've practiced it. You want the subheadings and to come naturally. And it works a treat. I use it for speeches all the time.
I like it, and I use a similar technique myself when I wake in the morning and I want to get my dreams down because they don't seem to go into the regular short-term memory. And so I need to thread my own story, and I'll have a word like this morning, mold was one of the words, and accident was another word of the words. And that all of a sudden you put those triggers down and the whole story can unfold from there. I want to talk about an area of memorization I still struggle with. And I do the repeat it twice. I try practicing it at night, and yet they still escape my mind. How do we use a bestiary, what is that, for memorizing names?
I pronounce it bestiary, but because in English we leave out the A of the beast, but it is a bestiary. In medieval times, they had bestiaries, which were books about beasts, and each of those animals in them were to do with allegories for stories, for ethics and morals and so on, which is very well, but I want to remember names because I'm very, very bad at names. So I created one with the first two letters of each of my beast, or when I couldn't, a plant or something, for the first two letters of all possible names that I could come up with. I'll explain what happens when it doesn't work. But so if I meet a Jenny, J-E is jellyfish to me, I immediately look at her hair and see if it looks like the tentacles of a jellyfish, and imagine a jellyfish on her head. That will give you the image back of J-E. It's usually enough. But I've found that with the main problem we have when we meet someone is that we get straight into the conversation and forget that we've acknowledged their name. And saying their name a few times becomes a little bit
weird.
I don't know. Weird. Thank you. So what I do now is I tell the truth. Telling the truth works a treat. I say, I really want to remember your name and I'm bad at names. Yeah. That is telling the person that they're important to them. Mm-hmm. You tell them that I have a system and I have to somehow associate you with a jellyfish. And while you're saying this, you're imagining the jellyfish. They will usually be able to tell you something, or they'll laugh or they'll go along with it. You must use the term associate you with, because when you meet Hillary, it's a hippopotamus. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to tell Hillary she's a hippopotamus. But it's amazing how often they'll come back with a story. But the fact that you have paused the conversation, told them they're important, and talked about something that is very novel, it's not the way you normally start a conversation, that will get their name in for you. And when I'm brushing my teeth at night, I do a revision of everyone I've met in the day.
So if we dive into that, in fact, there's a gentleman, ad hirondum. He advises locations, distractions, distinct. What can you tell us about these key things that we want to use when we create our own memory palace?
The ad hirondum is a school textbook written and used in ancient Rome and Greece, because they used these methods. Cicero and all of those, for all their great long speeches, and Homer all used the same methods. And in the ad hirondum, they advise you to make your locations spaced apart. Mm-hmm. So in this room, I wouldn't put 50 locations. I'd only put 5 or 10 at the most, so that I've got something, good light, so that your imaginings of what's going on there are clear and bright in your mind. and that your imaginings are very vivid, like, again, violence but most of mine aren't particularly violent or crude, but vivid, with vivid characters. And that's why if you want to memorize chemistry or something else, give everything a character and a personality, because otherwise you can't make stories. And that's what I worked out with Indigenous cultures, where I first came to this before I knew about the Greeks and Romans, is that they give character to everything and then tell stories about it. And so every animal has a personality which describes it and its behavior, but also adds ethical stuff. So it really works well to do this association with the landscape.
I'm already picturing Indigenous stories in my head. What can you tell us about the stories of Indigenous culture and just how incredible is the amount of knowledge that's been carried forth 7,000, 10,000 more years?
Well, let's start with the Navajo, seeing you mentioned them. This sort of research is hard to find, but the Navajo have a recollection of individuals of 700 insects. So they don't just know they know all the birds and the mammals and the reptiles and all the rest, plus 700 insects, classified, behavior, identification, and most of those they only eat one, and another 10 or so are botherers like gnats and things they need to deal with. Yeah. All the rest are known because knowledge is, all humans have a fascination for knowledge, and then they're used for metaphor. So these are memorized using mythology of vivid stories about the animals, which encode deep in them all this information. So the stories we hear from Indigenous cultures are the stories told to children, which are the foundation. Now, this is what I think we're missing from our education systems now in Australia. I'm not sure how it works in America, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same. In the olden days for us, but certainly Indigenous cultures, they lay down a foundation and then build on it. And so the stories we hear, the children's ones, are the foundation, and then you need to be initiated to get the highest level stories. That is a level of secrecy. Here it's called secret business, restricted information. All Indigenous cultures do it. And the reason, if I'm just being pragmatic, there's spiritual and religious reasons, but sticking to my memory pragmatism, that stops the so-called Chinese whispers effect of information being corrupted by being told by everyone, because at the higher levels it's restricted and checked and checked and checked and kept accurate. So accurate that we have stories from around the world now, but strongly from Australia, where we still have some cultures intact, that date back 10,000 years of 10,000, probably more. This research is just happening now, of changes to the landscape that we know happened at the end of the last ice age. And their stories include complete descriptions of what the landscape was like, which is now under the bay. And these were written down from Indigenous informants before the scientists had gone and found all this. Islands that weren't islands because the water levels were lower, and so on. That's how strong these stories are and how reliable they are using these methods.
Woohoo! All of this is leading to improving our memory. So I want you to tell us about Dominic OBrien and his influence on your thinking.
Dominic OBrien was 8 times world memory champion, who started talking about these methods long before I did. And I read his books. And when I started training, because I was convinced I still wouldn't be able to do it, I was introduced to Dominic via email, and he started encouraging me and telling me little things and little steps. One really important thing he told me was exercise, that if you sit still for a while, your brain starts to glug. I don't know if there's a technical term, but the glug will do. So before I do any memory work, that's why walking and Indigenous cultures dance their knowledge, because movement will make your brain oxygen to your brain, and your brain works. And it changes your mood too. It enhances. So before I did training, he was training me for memory competitions. I always put on some music and dance, get all hyped up, or go for a walk, anything to get your energy up. And I got to the stage where I got addicted to exercise, an addiction that I will not ever give up. Some addictions are very good. I feel gluggy, and then I can see the difference. So when I'm memorizing stuff, I will usually be moving. Good for the body, good for the mind, good for everything. Dominic also has the rule of 5. If you want to remember something, you must make a novelty and make these images and connections, and then you need to revise it within an hour, within the day, within a week, within a month, and then you've got it permanently. So if you mentioned a country now, I haven't done that memory palace for ages now, but I will go straight to that location in my mind because it's there so permanently.
A ghostwriter who I've been working with, I had my last meeting with him. He was standing on a rebounder, bouncing up and down on this thing while talking to me on the phone. And I'm thinking about myself. I ran a small mountain quite literally before I had this interview as how I get my energy flowing and going and focus and concentrate. The idea of sit down and pay attention then is the antithesis of everything.
I was a teacher for 40 years in the classroom. Some kids naturally wiggle and make noise and that. So I had a simple rule. You sit up the back of the room. You do not have to sit still. You can walk up and down. If you're going to tap your pen, please do it on your arm so it doesn't disturb anyone. So I would have my room, and I had them in horseshoes and things too, not rows, so kids are looking at the back of each other's head. And my students were allowed to stand up and move around and talk. And it didn't affect the classes at all. But it did stop the problems with students that can't sit still, because why should they sit still? So, yes, there's lots of classroom techniques. The other thing is we have students sing and make up stories when they're little kids.
Yes, the emotion behind it too.
And then we tell them at about year 3, about 8 years old or something, to sit still. Now, when you're reading, you're in 2 dimensions and it's not dynamic. So anything read is less likely to be memorized than any other way. So one of the many, I've got a whole chapter on the lessons from the medieval. One of the big thing is draw your knowledge, because art, I'm now on my hobby horse. I haven't got it here with me, but I'll stand on it anyway in your imagination. Art and music should be at the heart of the curriculum, not the peripheries, and any form of exercise and movement, because singing information makes a massive difference to memorizing it. And I'm going to give you an example of an experiment we did on that.
Please.
And art, which is why art is so prolific as a memory device in Indigenous cultures. So I was working with one of our rural primary schools here, 70 students, and part of our curriculums, they have to learn about force right across the school, part of the science curriculum. So they did all their force experiments, and the teachers told them about it. And a week later, I spoke to every student individually, and I said, remember doing force in science? So I put it in context. What is a force? 3 out of 70 told me it's a push or a pull. 67 told me things like it's when your parents make you do things you don't want to do. It's what made the balloon go across the room. And half of them said, may the force be with you, which is lovely cinema,
yes,
dreadful physics. A music teacher took the Imperial March from Star Wars and made a little song, and I can't even say it without doing the actions of a force is a push or a push or pull. Just a little tiny bit. They sang it in music. They sang it in assembly once, nothing for a week. A week later, I quizzed every student, and every student laughed. That's important. And said a force is a push or a pull, and did the actions. 100% retention. Now, I'm not saying sing the whole curriculum. I'm saying sing the definitions, the basis, the foundation, And then you can build all your higher level thinking of analysis and hypothesis and so on top of a firm foundation.
Thank you. And we've got to jump into the neuroscience. Before I do that, just a little thing that I share with people when I'm coaching them and helping them plan out their day, plan out their week, plan out their lives, is I don't make a list. I believe the list is the worst thing in the world. I'm going to have them do a map, make a mind map, and draw things out.
Yes, so on your mind map and drawing them out, because connections aren't always linear. The visual alphabet works for linear things, but that's all I use it for. Most things I have as art. So if you look at Tibetan mandalas.
Thank you.
And they are, in fact, mind maps, but every one is an image. So the image produces it, prompts the response. Now, your mind, if you are forced to do what I call a mode shift. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about World War III, for example, and instead of writing World War III, you actually have to come up with a prompt image. Your brain has to engage, and it's a great way for keeping students well-behaved in class because they cannot just write the notes and talk about something else. You know, you can read a page of a book and be working out what you're having for dinner. You can't do that if you're forcing a mode shift from writing to art, from writing to music, from writing to dance. And so those mode shifts work a treat. So yes, do them as mind maps. Do everything that way. And whatever you do, don't type notes. Every page looks identical.
I have to type for this show here, but I have color all over the place so that things pop, so that things have meaning to me.
And medieval people did drolleries, little drawings all around the manuscripts. If you look at medieval manuscripts, they've got all these little drawings that, like a whole lot of rabbits capturing a fox and hanging it after a trial. You know, they often don't have much to do with the text, but it makes every page look different and therefore memorable.
And it means also, if we go to something like a Da Vinci Code, that if we get into this, we realize that we're deciphering a code, and there is so much more than just a colorful image or textile in front of us. There's an entire story, there's an entire language or universe in that painting.
Exactly. And that's what you start doing when you put in memory. You start seeing patterns that you couldn't see otherwise. If we just go back to my countries, which is just one of them, the 8th biggest country in the world is Bangladesh. Much bigger in population, about the same as Russia, bigger than Japan and Germany and England and Italy and all of those. I'm belting around my memory palace now. Bangladesh, so you start asking questions. How come I've heard so much less about it? How come it hasn't colonized the world? Little Spain and Portugal and all these tiny things have gone out and colonized, and England and America. Why not Bangladesh? And you start wanting to know more. Once you've got those hooks in place, you start wanting to know more. That's why I can't sit still every day, because I have got so many hooks that I want to know more about. But the more training you do, the quicker you are at coming up with the images, and the more fun it is. Mm-hmm. Because you're making up stories the whole time. Your brain does not have a capacity limit. I've got 1,000 locations in action all the time. I'm always adding more stories. I'm absolutely convinced the brain has no limit to the capacity for imagination.
What is going on? If we dive into the neuroscience and the hippocampus and memory, what's going on here?
It's called a temporal snapshot. This astounded me when I first started working with neuroscientists, is every novel thought actually lays down a physical neural pathway in your brain. Physically.
Thoughts
astounding.
Become things.
Yes, but it doesn't get reinforced. It'll just disappear again and not be accessible again. So by reinforcing it, and novelty, imagination, stories are all the things that reinforce that and turn it from short-term to long-term. And it's called a temporal snapshot. If you do two things at the same time, so if you're thinking about a location and you're thinking about a country at the same time, your brain will associate them. That's why people say, you know, if you're trying to remember something, how old was my child at that time? Your brain links things at the same time. Yeah. So the brain naturally does this landscape thing. There's a lot of research. The Nobel Prize for Medicine 2014 showed how these place cells in the brain link information with landscape. So what Indigenous cultures do, they also use handheld devices. We haven't even got there, miniature memory palaces.
I'm going to try to get to at least one or two barely right at the end.
Right, because I probably get more email about the African Lacasa handheld memory devices than I do on anything else. But these methods of associating knowledge with place and with experience and with stories and with music are built into the neuroscience of our brain.
Very, very good. So let's jump from there. Let's go to a Lacasa. In fact, you started making these with very maybe challenged art skills, maybe like my level of art skills, and it actually helped.
Yes, Lacasa is, I'm holding one up, but if you can't see it, it doesn't matter. This is mapped on a real one. I had to go to America to see it.
So hold that slowly right there. Just pause there. Okay. Very good. What am I looking at?
You're looking at a bit of wood with beads and shells on it. This isn't a real one because they're too rare but was made for me, matching all the information I got from the real Lacasa at the Brooklyn Museum. So I'd read about these things claiming that the Luba people in Africa could encode masses of information to a bit of wood with beads and shells on it. And I, being very skeptical and a science writer, thought, look, I'm not even going to believe this. But you have to test things if you're skeptical. So I grabbed a bit of wood from where they were making our new veranda, glued beads and shells on randomly, and then decided to encode a field guide to our Victorian birds because I'm married to a fanatical birder. So I started which way up with the emu there. Each family of the birds is mapped there, and then I've got a story telling me every species. I have 412 birds encoded to that.
Wow.
And it works unbelievably. I don't have to have it with me. I know it so well. Mm-hmm. We've got kids as young as 2 and 3 making Lacasa and using them. So, for example, that bead is this is my terrible craft skills coming out. That is Menuridae, which is the family of our lyrebird. And I dribbled glue down the side because I'm not very good at this stuff. But I've got to remember Menuridae. So I imagine a man has urinated down the side of my Lacasa.
Where the glue has gone down, yep.
I'm never going to forget that. Menuridae, and it's a lyrebird. He's lying about it.
Yeah.
That's made the connection. That connection is permanent, and now I can add any information I want about the lyrebird. The Ojibwe, Native Ojibwe, with their birch bark scrolls work exactly the same way. Winnebago do songboards. Every Indigenous culture do some form of memory boards, and they work so well.
Do you think it's something that if you were to work with a child and get them to be working on their memory early for fun, we'll say, would you start, because this is such tactile, it's such a kinesthetic experience?
And what is important is the process of making it. Do not make them a Lacasa. Have the beads and shells or whatever they want ready, and by saying, okay, I now need something to represent a gum tree. Mm-hmm. They choose which one for them triggers the gum tree. It becomes a personal object that they've chosen. I didn't with this. I wish I had. I did with this one much more. But this object is so precious to me. If anything happens, if the house catches fire, I will grab husband first, obviously, photographs, and my Lacasa. It's worthless to anyone else, but to me, I have such an emotional engagement with it that it's very precious. And kids love making them. We get the beads free from opportunity shops, charity shops, because they get donated a lot of jewellery and some of it is broken. They collect that for the schools. And it's really good. Kids love them.
Let's blow one more myth, and then we'll wrap things up. Do kids have a better ability to learn languages than we do as adults?
That's a myth in some ways. They certainly have a better ability to pick up the accent. Mm-hmm. And if they're exposed to it, the children learn languages better because they're exposed to it all the time, and you've got adults talking to them in that language. But learning foreign languages, they've got immersion things in schools, that older kids coming in will pick it up and get there just as quickly because they have better learning methods. And a lot of the experiments with young children with languages, you speak in a simpler language to them. So they need less vocab to convince you they're speaking it. Definitely better on accents, but not definitely better on ability to learn vocabulary and to speak and read it.
This goes in a whole nother tangent that we'll save for another interview. We're going to have you back someday, which is confidence.
That would be lovely.
It's confidence. The more you practice,
Yes.
the better you get, the more willing you are to put yourself out there. And kids, because they don't know that they shouldn't know or that they should know, they have no problem putting themselves out there at that point, and then they're able to make the connections more quickly.
The first few times I did speeches from using the visual alphabet or a memory palace, I didn't trust it, so I had my notes standing next to me. Now I never bother because I never use them. Yeah. But yes, my confidence is way better because I know what I'm doing. One of my readers said she encoded to her hands the 10 points she had to make during the interview. And she was really nervous, but she said having her hands on her knee, tapping each finger, her confidence got boosted amazingly by that simple little technique. Yes, it makes a big difference to confidence.
And you can use your body as a memory palace, which is what you're talking about right there. Take that anywhere you go.
Indigenous cultures do that all the time. There's so many methods that are so simple because Indigenous cultures, the reason they have to be the memory experts, their survival depended on it. So they're the people we can learn most from.
Awesome. So where can people go to find Memorycraft and to find out more?
It should be in every bookshop at the moment, and all the online bookshops have it. Pegasus Books in America. It's been out in Australia for 6 months and got a fantastic reaction. It's just been published in America by Pegasus Books, and they have got it everywhere, and they're wonderful.
Awesome. And I can't recommend, not only can you get it online, actually, do you have a website you want to send people to?
Yes, if you just Google my name, Lynne, L-Y-N-N-E-K-E-L-L-Y, you'll get my website.
Fantastic. And go over to Lynne Kelly and also check out your local bookseller because I want to support them as much as we can. And this
Absolutely.
is an awesome book that maybe we say it's required reading, A, if you're a parent, and B, after you cross a certain age when it's time to actually become a memory pro rather than to believe that your memory, it's time to go to mush.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to mush.
Woohoo! All right. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today, Lynne?
That your memory is fun. Enjoy it and trust it. And it's fun talking to you too.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Lynne. This has been so much fun, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know down under it's kind of challenged circumstances. We won't fully go there today, but you have brought your full memory capacity with me, and my heart and everything goes out to you. I can't thank you enough.
Yes, I've brought my ability to focus and not think about the fires. Yes.
Thank you. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Memorycraft, and begin radically improving your memory today and shine bright. Woohoo! Oh my God, this was awesome. Wow, I just had the most beautiful, surprising, inspiring, brain-boosting interview with Lynne Kelly. Such a special human being. To check out more brain-boosting interviews, click here, subscribe below, and be sure to click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows. Leave your comments below. Love you guys so much.